Okay, let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining from today, and welcome back to our webinar, the second part of our webinar, introducing the Common Grid Information Exchange Standard Conformity Assessment, Conformity Testing Services. My name is Marilee Akurishima, and I will be your host for today. Next, please. So let's start with some meeting principles. So as you see, the webinar is being recorded and will be published on various platforms. We will be sending the recording of the webinar again together with the questions and answers and the slides that you're seeing today this week following today's webinar. So we'll be receiving part 1 and part 2. And therefore, I would like to ask everyone to mute your microphone and switch off your camera. We will be taking all the questions through the chat box. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you put your question in the chat box, and we will be going through this question at the end of the webinar. Please bear with us as we make this interesting to everyone. If you find the material a bit detailed or technical, then add your question, as I mentioned, in the Q&A in the chat, or feel free later on to reach out for more information. So in terms of
one of the opportunities is in Canada also, with very big hydro penetration, in which one of their biggest opportunities was on.
So yeah, welcome to our second part of the webinar. During the first part, we have introduced CGMES version 3, and we spoke about the primary change from CGMES 2.4 to 3.0. We have also spoken about the importance of CGMES and about exchange of data, and hence the requirement or the need for conformity assessment scheme. And today, during our call, we will be introducing the conformity assessment scheme. So we will be talking about the services, the attestation process, the rules and the testing configuration, and we will end up by a demo about the conformity assessment tool that's used during this to provide these services. We'll end up also at the end, we'll leave 10 minutes for Q&A, for the Q&A session. Next, please. So in terms of the speakers for today, so I'll start with the introduction. My name is Marilee. I'm a chartered engineer and I have more than 15 years experience with various utility. I'm a member of IEC CIM 57. British Standard Institute. I'm a TOGAF certified. I have the pleasure with me to have today Svein Olsen. Svein is the CGMES subgroup convener in ENTSO-E. Svein is also a senior information architect working for Statnett, the Norwegian TSO. Svein also has been involved in CIM since 2009, and he's a member of various IEC CIM related group as well. With him as well, I've got Chaftar Ivanov. Chaftar is the managing director of Grid Digit, and he's also working with ENTSO-E. Chaftar provides consulting service in various topics related to CIM. He's been working with utilities for the last 20 years, and he's also a member of various associations and related to CIM. And with me as well, Lino Parka. Lino is the Symbion product owner, so this is a testing tool. Lino is a system architect and a product owner. He has more than 15 years of experience working on implementing applications with utilities. He also led several projects on CGMES 2.4.15, and he's a member of the IEC CIM 57 and TOGAF certified. Next. So let's start with the basics. What's the difference between conformance testing and interoperability testing? So conformance testing is a way to provide assurance that an application or an implementation is compliant to the standard or part of the standard, similar to what we're doing now in CGMES. During conformance testing, you provide accredited testing lab will run positive and negative test use cases to make sure or to verify that the application is conforming to the standard. Once this test is done, it will not give you an assurance that an implementation can exchange, or two implementation can exchange information without integration. However, interoperability is tests that you conduct to make sure that two different systems are able to exchange information. And normally you run tests that are positive tests, and this is also witnessed. In this case, interoperability does not indicate that these systems under testing are conforming to the standard. Hence, in order to have a successful implementation, we require to do conformance testing and interoperability testing. Next, please. So why we are doing conformance testing and what's the added value? So by having an independent testing body providing the services, we are creating value for the various stakeholder. As a first stakeholder, mainly to the application, to the vendors developing this application. This application, of course, could be in-house or developed by vendors. Vendors will have the ability to optimize the development of the product by having access to the assessment tool that are able to develop this tool to optimize their product, which means they are able to reduce the customer integration during project delivery. In addition to this, they are maintaining one set of customization or one set of profile, which means they are maintaining less integration, customized integration, and more, and a one profile which is suitable to everyone. But also having an attestation that a tool has been thoroughly tested. It means they are increasing their market share by the ability of providing this assurance to their customer. For utilities, DRs, and aggregators, it means they are able to purchase well-tested tool. And it means that these tools are cost effective and they have more chance to be interoperable in the future. But most important, they are able to have the ability to request for these tools to be certified for specific business processes, for example, for the EU network codes in particular. For associations such as ENTSO-E or EUDSO or the UCA, it means that they are able to continue assisting the vendors and the utilities in the deployment of international standard, and of course realizing the energy transition. And finally, for IEC CIM, it means that we are going away from proprietary kind of integration and we are using more and more open international standard, which is supported by the certification process, of course. Next, please. So in terms of the conformity assessment scheme evolution, as you know, in order to have these schemes, you need different roles to play different roles. You need different parties to do that first. So I will just introduce the role of each party. So the assessment body first. So this is a party that, of course, driving the process, providing the testing to the vendors and utilities, and they are in charge of the communication. And communication between the stakeholder and the opinion body and the scheme owner. The opinion body, so he's the one who issued the opinion on a certain party or a certain vendor attestation to provide an attestation to conformity, and of course they rely on to get their opinion from the assessment body based on the test use cases or the testing that has been done. And finally, you have also a scheme owner. A scheme owner is the owner of the scheme, of course. He owns the conformity assessment processes, but also the change to these processes. So he's in charge of the change management. So previously, what we used to have in terms of setup, and so we used to be the assessment body for the previous CAS scheme 2.4. However, from December onward, ENTSO-E has now DNV has been appointed as the testing lab, providing this testing services. However, we are aiming for this for the testing to be provided by DNV, but also any testing lab was able to provide this testing service. In terms of opinion body, ENTSO-E, the CIM expert group, used to be and remains, of course, the opinion body. And also for the scheme owner, so that would be used to be ENTSO-E. Currently, it's ENTSO-E. But what we are foreseeing with the CAS being part of the IEC standard, that IEC or CNELEC would be the future scheme owner for this. Of course, in that case, the ENTSO-E CIM expert group would have to request a formal request from the IEC to remain the opinion body, or whoever is the association being the opinion body. So this could be EUDSO or the UCAI user group in that case. If we go next. So in terms of roles and responsibilities roadmap, what we see today is the setup for today, what you see on the left on the slide. So with the test use case owner and the certification body being ENTSO-E. DNV is providing these services, the lab testing services under the ISO 9001 requirement. And of course, in here we are testing products developed by vendors or in-house to be used by utility application. However, in terms of roadmap, we are foreseeing that the accreditor of the scheme becomes IEC CNELEC. The certification body, depending on which business process is being tested, that we have a various certification body, such as ENTSO-E, UCA, and EU user group, who are contributing to this schemes developing of the scheme. You have the lab open to DNV and any other testing labs as well. And of course, we will be testing same various product related to various business processes. And here we will be not just focusing on the transmission, but also focusing on use cases related to DSOs, coordination between TSO and DSOs, and other use cases where we see fit. And in terms of the services that we are providing at the moment, so we have various services that you see on the left. The first service is subscription to this conformist tool. So this is here where it's provided. It's a subscription where you sign for it, and we'll see a demo later on. So this could be by a vendor or by an utility interested in testing their exchange of data or developing their data. And this is completely, this is self-assessment completely done by the party who is subscribed to the tool. Next, what you see is you see the pre-conformist testing. This is a session that could be done where you could have access to the testing expert in case you are focused on running or having a flavor or how would conformist testing would be in real time. The idea here is that you get prepared for this conformist testing, and here you have the ability of running the test so many times as much as you want until you are confident and ready for the conformist testing. Then you have the conformist testing, where it's the official testing, where the vendor and DNV are running this conformist testing. Next, as a roadmap would be going to site acceptance testing. So this is where the utilities installing the systems or the systems in their environment would request that the testing is done on the utility data. The difference is in conformance testing, you're doing testing using testing data. However, in SAT, you're doing a testing using the utility data. And finally, also the business process testing, where you are testing end-to-end business process. How does this work? What you see on the right is that the vendor will, following his self-assessment, will fill in a declaration of conformity, where he would specify the tool that he wants to test and the version and which exact profile he wants to test against or which categories. And then based on this, in the CAS scheme that you will see, we have different test use cases that's available, and based on what he wants to test, then this test will be tailored to his use case. And then next would be the tool or the system would be tested, and at the end of this testing, a testing report. We'll see a testing report. We will produce a testing report. Now, if everything is fine, of course, the vendor will get an attestation of conformity signed by ENTSO-E. However, if there is any defect, then the vendor would go back, update, and then come back for testing. Now, the advantage of the conformity assessment scheme is that we are able, in addition to doing this, to test the standard and to test the test use cases. So if during the testing you find any issues or any bugs, then we are able to report this back to the CIM expert group in ENTSO-E, which they will fix those bugs. But also if there is improvements to the standards, then also they will do this in coordination with the IEC. Next, please. And then next, Svein will be introducing the conformity assessment rules. Svein?
Yep, next slide. So what we expect is that the conformity assessments process will be a continuous process. The idea that in addition to that we're publishing a CAS version like we have now, this is then picked up by vendors or TSOs that is doing any development, TSO or DSO, that's in-house development, are performing then a self-assessment. And this self-assessment, we are really hoping that this has been automated and be part of the developer ops. So any new version will go through this process and have a self-declaration. The process should be done each time there is a change to any of the CIM functionality, but if it's made any update to the application that doesn't really involve any of the CIM compliance or the CGMES 3, there is no need for a second assessment. Then the assessment body, you're declaring, you're registering for a second-hand assessment. The assessment body will go through that type of assessment. The result of that will go to the opinion body, basically verifying that everything has gone according to the procedures, or actually taking in any kind of issues that are reported. And the attestation will be made to say which process that's conformed to. We also would like to continuously kind of updating the CAS version, so it's versioning of it, but primarily we don't want to do any changes to the application profile because that's a separate process, but we would like to continuously improve particularly the testing configuration. So be aware that there will be different versions here. And also what we want is to have a good dialogue with all tool vendors and utilities to make sure that we have as good as possible test configuration. The similar process will also could be executed on a site acceptance test, but then you're going to combine a multiple set of application that is then conforming to a business process that is going to be delivered by the utility. Next slide. So to kind of give everybody the necessary information, we have a range of documents. And we split it in multiple documents to have better control of versioning. Thinking that the overlooking scheme, so like the document, the overlisting, listing what each document, that will be very much persistent. Also the conformity assessment framework, that item 12, we like to make that as persistent as possible. But what we make the change is the part 4, which is the Excel sheet describing each of the test use cases. We are moving in the direction to make that machine readable, but currently it's just an Excel sheet. And any input of good scripting is also very welcome to improve that process. And then you have a range of documents that provides the template for how you're going to be filling out, the vendors filling out the conformity. These templates can also be used by the utility to clearly state what the expectation, if there's any requirement that the tool needs to meet. So overall, what we said, we're trying to accommodate multiple tools and different functionality. The one that is tagged with question marks is the one that we have made changes to. So the one that is familiar with the 2.4, the 2.0 costs can pay attention, but particular attention. But I will go through, or we will go through the primary changes. Next slide. So you can see there is a range of different things that can be certified or assessed. And we have done that because they're all different tool vendors. I mean, some vendors have tools that can support all of this, and for them, it may be quite a bit of overhead to establish each of this. But we can have parsers that are only doing import or export or converters. And the idea is to have a way of having these tools also assessed. What we have changed is previously we had an overall conformity status, like saying that the whole thing to the CGMES, but we have chosen to take that away because it's a very, very difficult how you're going to assess, because in principle that needs to be assessed against the type of tooling, and it's very difficult to group them. As CGMES is primarily looking as an exchange, the primary focus is to make sure that tools can exchange information, and not that just the data is exchanged, but also the meaning of the data. So a lot of this functionality is not kind of elaborating on the functionality like of topology processing or power flow, but we are trying to cover it in such a way that you do understand the data that you're going to be importing, or the tool going to import, and what is going to export. We have done a little bit of changes in the idea of import and export. So we have 3 categories of import and export. The inclusive, that means that the reason for this is done is so it's going to be easier for utility to understand what is the requirement and how the system works. So the inclusive one means that you group the data together. So if, for instance, boundary management can be handled together with the EQ, and you put the data together so you can import it. The individual means that each individual profile is handled, including the dependency and as an individual. And the difference means that it's dealing with the exchange of difference files. And in the format here, everything is not assessed. So that means that anything that is possible, you can state yes or no, or you can state that hasn't been assessed. The NA means that it's not available or not applicable for assessment. Then the same thing for the grouping of the type of functionality is update of repository diagrams on each of these things of follow possibilities. But as I said, the dynamic short circuit is not really meant as a test of that functionality, by the idea that you can import the import data and having an understanding what this means. Next slide. So this is just showing an example of filling out. So very, very simple, very short. So you put in yes and you put no, and you then state what the functionality provides. So you have gold, silver, and bronze level to indicate the depth of the functionality. Next slide. I just included this to elaborate what I said about the profile categories, so the inclusive and the individual. So the idea is that inclusive takes all the import-export is then related to capture the relationship between the instances, and individual handle each files as a separate instance and can treat track of them. And the difference is including the subset of exchanging difference models. Next one. And this is then showing which test cases. So TUC means test use case 01 is covering the inclusive. So if it can pass that, it deals with inclusive, and so goes with the individual. So each of these import and export has dedicated test use cases. As you can see, some of the test cases cover multiple profiles as well. So meaning that if you cover the full length of it, you will be conforming to the both. Next slide. When it deals with the functional categories, we have the gold. That means that you have full support. That means the application support all the profile, all the level needed for the gold. And the same, the silver, that means that some of the requirement is covering all the up to what's been tagged as silver, silver or bronze, or silver and bronze to deal with silver. And the bronze only deal with the bronze. For the dependency of the import and export, you have gold if you support all three of them. You have silver if you support two, regardless for which two it is, and bronze if you support one of them. Next. So when you open the Excel sheet, you will find this information that's stating which test models that is for bronze, which one is for silver, and which one for gold. And as we have the functional category on top, and you can follow which different test cases are addressing which topic, and then we kind of having the minimum expected, and then we have the kind of minimal required, and then what was relevant profiles for that whole functionality. Thank you.
Okay, so I continue with a short information about the test configurations, and in the next 2-3 minutes we will go through that because the time is short. This slide is basically summarizing what Svein was presenting in terms of changes and new developments. So I suggest we go to the next one. So here you see the list of the test configurations that are included in the CAS version 3. We have the full grid, microgrid, mini grid, power flow, the phase shifter transformer, rear grid, small grid, and Svedala. It's very important that you read the disclaimer, which is in the package. So this gives you a little bit more information on the terms on which these models are provided. And in the next slide, we have here some more information on the content of the model. So full grid, for those of you who doesn't know, it's including all the classes and properties included in the profiles. So this is mainly done for the purpose of testing the parsing of the data. A microgrid is a small network of 16 nodes with the 2 model authority sets and boundary. Minigrid is primarily used for the short circuit tests and is done on the 6909 short circuit standard. Small grid originates from the IEEE 118 model, and it also has some geographical information which is more realistic. The Rio grid is also coming from a Rio model. It's a little bit bigger system, while the PST and the power flow cases are very small, and they are meant for the testing of the phase shifter transformers and some details on the power flow. Svedala is a new model that was introduced, and here there are more realistic configurations on the substations. Going further to the next slide. So here we have the list of the application profiles that are included in the conformity assessment scheme. And that README file that is included in the package also contains a little bit more detailed information of what the content is. But in general, we have the OCL, where this is including the OCL design constraints on the profiles. We have the RDFS 2020, which includes the schemas for all the profiles included in the CGMES 3. We have a beta version of the RDFS, so this is provided for the information and your feedback. This is still not finalized as a content. And we have the package with the shackle constraints, which are also part of CGMES 3. So I think with this one, I can hand it over to you, Lino, and we will enjoy the demo.
Okay, so I will show you a demo version of Symbion, and I will start by showing the product page on the Veracity marketplace. So Veracity is a platform by DNV, which is built on top of Microsoft Azure, where services are provided such as Symbion. So in the marketplace, basically on the product page, you can see some basic information about the service, some screenshots, and some details on the scope of each package, what type of functionality is included, and pricing plans, and some links to previous webinars. Regarding the pricing, so the service is not live yet, so it is expected to go live this week. But basically then these buttons will change from contact provider to actually being able to access the service. The idea is that you can have a free demo where for 14 days you can try the functionality of the application out. That is only with the import-export inclusive and individual. And with some functionality disabled, basically what is disabled is that you cannot download any validation reports, detailed reports, which I will show you in just a second. And then if you go for a subscription, you can have basically the same as the free demo, but with access to pre-test and the conformity test. And then the other two are basically additional functionality on top of the basic. So the incremental is including the difference files, and advanced functionalities are basically all the other functions that's same presented in the conformity assessment scheme. So if I access the tool, I will be redirected to the login page for Veracity. And as I have been already logged in, basically you need to have a Veracity account in order to access the service, and that you can open free of charge. But that is a prerequisite because as this tool is hosted on Veracity, it uses the Veracity identity provider. Once the application is opened, you have access to the home screen, And here you have a short description of CIM and CGMES. And you can see the list of your previous test sessions. Now these sessions have a status. So has the session been executed with failed test use cases, succeeded? Is it in progress? Is it in setup? So these icons are explained below. The session can have a name. It has a standard which is being evaluated. For now, this will be exclusively CGMES. The type, which I will come to shortly, overall conformity level, a number of test use cases, date ran, and some actions, which I will also come back to in just a moment. What you will basically want to do, first thing you start the application, is you will want to set up a new test, give it a name. And then you want to select which type of test session you want to perform. So there are three types, as you can see: self-assessment, pre-test, and conformance test. And this is in line with what Marilee actually presented earlier in the slides. So the self-assessment is, like it says, testing on your own. So if you want to run a test yourself, unsupervised, it doesn't matter if you're a vendor utility, you just want to test your files, you can do this via this option. If you want to go for a pre-test, basically to prepare for a conformance test with assistance from DNV, you can choose this option. And conformance test is, of course, the official test, which needs to be scheduled. Either one of these two options requires you to fill out the declaration of conformity, which is one of the documents from the conformity assessment schema, which will be also familiar with you who have gone for conformity with CGMES 2.4. And it basically requires you to fill out some basic information like name, title, company, etc. In the interest of time, I will go for the self-assessment, so I don't have to fill anything out, and go to the next step. What follows is a screen, which is actually a representation of what Svein was showing just now. And you remember you have the inclusive, individual, and difference profiles. You have the overall conformity per profile, and then you have the conformity level of functions. What you may notice is missing here are the test use cases. And this tool is actually built to facilitate selection of required conformance levels per profile to be as simple as possible, because the logic behind is fairly complex. And the test use cases, which are listed below in the dropdown, they're all here. They're automatically selected based on what you select here. So, for example, if I want to say that I am doing export inclusive of equipment, then automatically test use case 14 will be selected. Similarly, for boundary, for short circuit, for operation, SSH and SV, I will have the corresponding test use cases automatically pre-selected. So this cannot be changed. The system automatically does this for you. What the system also does is, while I change these selections, it automatically calculates the conformity level of import and export on the right-hand side. So if I also choose import, then I will have bronze on import as well. If I, for example, also choose individual import here, I will go to silver. And if I choose also difference, I will go for gold, which is, as Svein actually explained in the slides, if you have 1, you are bronze. If you have 2, you are silver. And if you have 3, you are gold. What the tool does, which is also nice, is that, for example, if I remove these two and want to say that I am testing, for example, equipment, let's say short circuit. So automatically I have a small warning that says, okay, this actually depends on the equipment, and I have unmet dependencies listed here. If I select more than one, they are all listed above this table. So it's plain to see that if I want to support individual export on these profiles, I also need to support individual export on equipment, and by doing so, all these warnings will go away. You can see that also some things are grayed out, and this is because these things are not applicable. If you remember from the slides that Svein was presenting, so some test use cases and combinations are not applicable, and these are actually here grayed out, so they cannot be selected. In the interest of time, I will not go for all of this to show you how the application is running, because I will have to upload quite some files, so I will stick with these. I'll just show you. So basically, when you go for the basic subscription, you have these two, inclusive and individual, enabled. The advanced, the incremental includes the difference, and the advanced also includes all these other functions. And similar as for the selection of the profile, if I want to select, for example, diagram layout to be gold, which is the only one, then I get all the dependencies that are missing for this function to be able to be supported. And now that I have done all of this, and let's leave this to imports, I have automatically all my test use cases selected for me, so I don't have to worry about that. What I can also do is download if you remember the file list, so all the test configurations, all the applicable test configurations for these test use cases that are listed here, and also the Excel with all the test use cases that are relevant for testing. And this is useful because, of course, if you want to do self-assessment, you have to test with these test data, these test configurations, and you can basically just download them using this button. Once you have decided on what you want to test, you can go to the next and final step, which is to upload the actual test data. And here we can see that for each test use case, we have a short summary of what it does. And we have a button to manage files, and we have an icon showing that basically files have not been uploaded yet, so we cannot continue. So what I have to do is for each of these, for example, for an import test use case, I have to upload a screenshot. And this is not very useful for self-assessment, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So during a pre-test or especially conformance test, you will have to provide you will have to show how your application works, take a screenshot and then upload it here in the tool. So we have traceability when we actually do the test. I'll just upload a test screenshot. The same thing I will do for this one. And as I'm doing this, you can see that automatically these icons are becoming check marks from Access. When I go into the export test use cases, the first thing that the application asks is, do I want to run this test case on an internal configuration? And what does this mean? So if you want to test on a standard configuration, the one from a list that Chaldar was talking about, so for example, full grid, mini grid, real grid, etc., then you will say, no, I don't want to run an internal configuration. But, and this actually means that the step, because validation is basically done in two steps. First is validation using shackle rules. And the second step is comparison with the actual standardized test configuration. But if you want to skip the test number 2 and just validate your model, if it's conforming to the CGMES rules, shackle rules, then you can choose yes and upload any type of test file, which doesn't have to necessarily be a model which is from the conformity assessment scheme. And this is useful if you want to, for example, test an exchange between two tools in a utility, or if a vendor wants to actually test some real or model output, which is not connected to the conformity assessment scheme. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will run everything on standardized configurations. And the next things that you can see on this screen is that it lists the mandatory configuration that you have to upload data for, but you can also choose additional test configurations from the list of standard ones and add them as well. In the interest of time, I will not do this, but I will just upload the the files that are necessary for each export use case, which are mandatory, and that is actually only the full grid. For the full grid, I will on purpose, I have prepared a file which has some errors, just to show you how this process goes. So I will on purpose have a negative or resilience test. And then for the SSH, very similar thing. And what you can see is that this thing takes quite some time, especially if you have a lot of test use cases. But the point is that once you do this and upload all the files, it is very easy to just duplicate the session from the home screen, which I will show you as soon as we run this, and duplicate it along with the files as well. So you can change only a single or a couple of files and not have to go through this whole process again. So once I have updated all the files, the next icon has been enabled. And if I press this, the system will automatically run validation of the uploaded models for each test use case and have a summary. So it has finished now. So there were 6 tests in total, 5 succeeded, 1 failed, as expected, and they are non-inconclusive or pending. So pending is when tests are running. For example, for real grid, validation takes quite a bit of time. So these test cases are in pending, but this user interface is refreshed automatically. So as soon as the test case has completed, the test run has completed, you will see the results. The results are grouped by test use case, and I can see that for test use case 14, that it has failed, and I have 41 errors. And I can see here a summary table per error type, how many errors there are in the file. And what can I do with this now? So first of all, there are 2 things. I can download the file that I uploaded, the test data, which is useful if you don't have it or you don't know which one you uploaded or whatever. But I can, which is much more useful, download the actual detailed report. And these are the functionalities which are actually disabled during the trial, which I've been talking about a couple of minutes before. If I download this Excel and unzip it, it's actually an Excel file. And here are the detailed lists of errors and with each object ID. So if I go back and look, for example, I have one instance of this error. I can just copy it, find it here in the terminals, find it here. Then see which object ID that is. And if I open a file in a text editor, like Notepad++, and look for this ID, I can see that it has 1 terminal. So if you remember, the error was that the switch or subclass does not have 2 terminals. So let's see. I have 1 terminal with the conducting equipment, which I am looking for. I have the actual conducting equipment, which is in this case a breaker. And there is actually no second terminal, which is not surprising since I deleted it. So what I can do now is show you, okay, I figured out this was wrong. I managed to fix it somehow. So I don't have to go from scratch and set up a new test and do all that stuff again. What I can do is actually clone a session with files. And this immediately has all the selections that I've done previously. So all the profiles, all the levels, everything is already set up. I can just go next. All the files have already been uploaded, and I can just go here, delete the one that actually produced the error, and put in correct one. And when I press again to start the validation process, I see now that I have no more errors and the session has succeeded. And since we are running out of time, I think this was more or less everything that I wanted to show you. So now we can go and take some questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lena. And we had, we had a couple of questions which we can go through them. Please keep, if you have any question, please enter your question meantime. I'll start from the start. So the first one is who will be providing testing services for CAS version 2.4 and 3.0? I did enter that 2.4 is still ENTSO-E providing the services. However, for 3.0, it will be DNV. I don't know, Svein, if you want to add anything.
No, that's correct. Just bear in mind that we call the CAS 2.0, which will be the one that includes the CGMES 2.4. But
yeah, thank you. And in terms of information, still you could access the ENTSO-E website for information about the CAS scheme 2.0 or 3.0, but also you have this available, as Lena showed you, on the DNV CIM EG on Veracity website. And then we had an interesting question about what happened with the data uploaded in terms of storing, deleting, or encrypting. In terms of this is a real data. So what we're doing during FAT, we're doing testing data. So we're using testing data in that case. But however, if there is a real data, of course, everything will be treated confidentially. And of course, I mean, this data will be destroyed later when there's no use for it. But of course, this data is treated confidentially as well.
Yeah, I would like to add, Marilee, so you can delete the test session at any time. That will automatically delete all the data. The data is stored securely on Veracity in the cloud, so isolated from other applications. And of course, you can always exercise your GDPR right and ask for all the information to be deleted. Regarding encryption, so for this first release, we do not encrypt the data, but it is not actually accessible through any other outside means than the upload or download interface in the application. So once we plan to open up an API in future iterations, and then we will also, of course, consider encrypting the data.
Thank you, Lino. If there is any more question, please add them to the chat. And then as a gentle reminder, we will be sending the recording, all the presentation that you just showed. We have a new question actually. Was Symbiont tested with real TSO's RSC data, example, power of flow or merging? Maybe that's a good question for you, Lino.
So yes, we have actually tested, and we are still in the process of testing the tool with real models. And of course, these are not very easy to come by. So as we go live and have more users, we will also test the tool further, but we already have had an instance where we tested with real data.
Yeah, thank you. How does the tool evaluate screenshot of import function? What did screenshot contain, or what does it contain?
Yeah, basically, if you remember the results of the session itself, so I had two screenshots uploaded, and they are not evaluated, not automatically, of course, at least. So the screenshots are purely as traceability for the actual conformance test, that all the information has been provided and verified by a consultant doing the test. So the screenshots have no machine readable value. The same as during the conformance test, you actually have to provide proof that you are actually doing something in your application, not only uploading files. So this is in that regard. So for self-assessment, the screenshots are not actually useful.
Yes, but in addition to this, Lino, the reason why we say screenshot, because not all the tools are able to import and export. And in that case, if you have an import only functionality, you can support only import, then the proof that you could provide is only screenshot. And this is why we're allowing screenshot.
Yeah, currently, unfortunately, there is no way, and you are right, there is no way to test an application's import functionality other than screenshot. So there have been some discussion during the going live of the Conformity Assessment Scheme 3.0 that the tool should be able to produce some log of processing or validating internally the model, but this is not yet defined. So currently, the only possible way to actually see that the application is doing something is to look at its screen, and that's why you have to provide a screenshot.
Thank you. In terms of the next question, in terms of validating a model, what is the type of reporting for OCL validation? Is it possible to display RDF graph for the validation report for Shackle? I have seen a spreadsheet for the validation in a tabular form for Shackle validation.
Yes, so regarding the OCL, I think Chavdar is better placed to explain the differences. Currently, the only way to see the result of the validation is in a tabular form. So there is no representation of the RDF graph. And regarding the OCL rules, Chavdar, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, but as far as I understand, the tool is relying on Shackle validation. So in the Symbion, there's no OCL validation. So
yes,
for that could be other tools. But the difference between OCL and Shackle is, yeah, they were provided for backwards compatibility a little bit for the CGMES 3. And we assess that the future will be more towards Shackle, as this was claimed to be the standard for expressing constraints for the RDF.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Chavdar. Then could you provide testing data example of sophisticated data?
So the test configurations that were used in this demo are actually part of the conformity assessment scheme and are available on the ENTSO-E website. So the download button that I showed in Symbion is just for convenience, so you don't have to look at which test configurations apply to you. The tool automatically packages everything in one zip for your convenience. So basically, but the data is the same as on the ENTSO-E website.
Yes, thank you, Lino. Does the Symbion license include update to new CIM version? So I think here it means, does it include the new up-to-date CIM version? Probably the question, which is yes. And of course, with every time there will be an update to the CAS scheme, then of course Symbion will be updated accordingly.
Yes, I was just about to say that basically the tool is linked to the version of the conformity assessment scheme, not actually the CIM version. That's implicit, but yes. So even if there is a new CIM version, the conformity assessment scheme needs to be updated before it will be supported by the tool. Yeah.
And of course, ENTSO-E remains the owner of the CAS scheme. In terms of advanced functionalities, version effectively required for comprehensive CGMES conformity?
Yes, more or less. The answer is yes.
Yeah. So when additional information is requested from the opinion body for a specific conformity process, how is the information provided? Is the session maintained so that the tool provided can upload new data?
So for a specific conformity process, the session cannot be rerun. So once it is run, it is basically locked as it is. And any changes to any specific configuration requires a new session. And that's why we have the copy session with files to make that process as easy as possible. Because one conformity run basically implies that you are not changing the application code while the conformity is being assessed. So if you are actually doing some changes and providing some different data, that means that maybe you have changed your application and that requires a new conformity assessment session.
But also,
I think this is also related to how the communication is with the ENTSO-E that has the opinion body. In principle, there's nothing preventing you from saying, I just do a first-hand assessment, and that is what we recommend to do for any new version, a bug fix or whatever, that you tell your user or anybody that, my version is compliant to all of this. Then you can do your second-hand assessment and you can kind of stop there. So, but if you're going to have the opinion body, you make sure that the assessment body knows that you want that, and that information for which test you have done and applied, and the opinion body doesn't need any extra information. It just needs the information about what you passed, and that the second assessment body's information of the report, and from that you get your attestation.
Yeah, thank you, Svein. And then I go to import use case. So hopefully that's the last one. What happens in case if for our system some data is not important from some particular profile? Can we pass the test for that kind of profile, or do we need to have in our system stored each single value of property from CGMES export based on particular profile?
Yeah, I mean, understand the question. And the point is that the conformity assessment scheme determines which configurations are mandatory for each test use case. And to answer your question, the full grid is mandatory for all export profiles. So basically, yes, you have to, if you say that you are conforming to that profile, you need to support all the properties and relations and objects classes in that profile.
Thanks, Lino. And we go to the last question that we'll take for today, which fees will have to be paid in order to be able to pass the conformity test. In that case, we will have to assess which profile you want to pass, how many test use cases we'll be testing, and accordingly we'll provide you with a code, no obligation code for the conformity assessment test. As Lino showed on the CIM EG Veracity web page, there is a contact provider where you could, put in details the test that you are interested in, and we're happy to provide the code accordingly. This would be the last question that we'll be taking for today. So thank you everyone for your active participation, for raising all the questions. I hope you find it interesting today. If you need any questions, or if you have further any question, please feel free to reach out. You could reach out through the CIM EG website, or also through the webinar page where you could contact us for further information. I'll be happy to supply this information. That's all from me for today. Thank you for our speakers. Thank you for the participants, and have a nice day. Thank you very much.